How are you? So nice to meet you.
Hi. Nice to meet you, Kim.
Yeah. I
Thanks
did.
for taking the time.
Are you based in Albuquerque?
I am now. I
Yeah.
am. I had
Yeah.
been based out of Austin in Texas for a long, long time,
Oh,
since
nice.
the early 90s. And then when the pandemic hit, I kind of closed up I was on a show here doing a pilot for a show called The Cleaning Lady
Oh, yeah.
and uh, decided to stay. At first they said, oh, just be a couple of weeks, just like we all thought. But
Yeah.
the more I stayed here, and I've been traveling so much that I was kind of done with Austin in some ways. It wasn't the
Yeah.
same town I was, and I just kind of when I was hiding here during the pandemic, just kind of fell in love with the desert and a woman who lives here. So you know what that leads
Well,
to.
there you go. There you
Here
go.
I
Twofer.
am. Exactly.
Oh, that's great. I
Yeah.
I was thinking about that because I looked at your list of resume and everything. I was like, wow, he traveled a lot. There was a lot going on. You were
Yeah.
busy.
It is busy. I
Yeah.
kind of bounced around. I lived out in LA for a while and did the commercial work thing. My brother was a camera operator,
Hmm.
and his first wife was a set decorator. And we all lived in Houston. I started in the business working for them just to make money to help with college and spring break and that kind of thing. And then once I got out, just kind of decided I really wanted to stay with it and landed a couple big jobs as
Yeah.
set director and never got that job at the bank or the brokerage firm like I was supposed to. I ran away with the circus.
Yeah, I so many people have said that too,
Yeah.
of like it's a circus and I just got caught up in it and then here I
Mhm.
am.
Here
Year
I am,
projects and projects later. Like it just
yeah, 38 years goes by and I'm still doing it.
oh, it's great.
Yeah.
I had interviewed Caleb and Brandon for Flamin' Hot on the podcast
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
they spoke so highly of you
Yeah.
when I spoke to them and so it was
Well, the feelings are mutual.
yeah, that had to be a fun project. It
It
looks
was. It
it looks
was awesome. It was a lot of fun, and it was interesting because Eva was involved with it. It was kind of a Hispanic based story, the whole Chicano experience of LA and that kind of thing. And I think at first they were kind of when people first meet me, I'm kind of this big ex football player kind of guy, and they're kind of like but I met Eva before and worked with Robert Rodriguez a lot, so was totally in tune with the whole Hispanic culture, so to speak, having done a lot of it. And it really was a dream project in a lot of ways. It was a lot of hard work, but it was a lot of fun. First, I was like, everyone's like, what?
yeah.
Cheetos?
She,
Really?
yeah.
Who knew?
Who knew? And it's such a great like American Dream type story.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
what I've told so many people about it of like, it's a good little movie. Flamin'
Yeah.
Hot. Like,
Yeah. It's one of those ones at the end where you kind of want to just stand up, go, yay!
yeah.
Good for you.
Unlike this one, David.
Yeah, this one's a little different ending. In fact, we didn't really know what ending they were going to go with, to be honest with you.
Oh,
We were
really?
speculating, we had gotten the scripts and all that early, but the ending was always up in the air. I'd seen it written a couple different ways.
Oh, wow.
And,
I mean,
whether they all survive, whether just the men survive, just the women survive, or, Isaac doesn't make it. So,
I'm gonna ask you the dumbest question.
yeah,
It is pronounced primeval. Is it?
correct.
Yes.
American Primeval. You,
Yes.
it looks like that.
I was
Primeval.
talking about it with my production designer. I was recently working with Jamie McCall. Said, "Oh, started American Primeval, like it's so good." And I was looking it up, and I was like, "Yeah, I got to start that." And I was like, "Primeval, Primeval." I was like, are you pronouncing it right?" And she's like, "I think so." And I was like, "Oh man, I gotta before I start this, I gotta make sure I'm saying it right."
Yeah.
I usually fumble people's names. I didn't want to.
Well,
So
mine's pretty straightforward.
yeah,
So,
yeah. And I have a son, David. I have a husband, David. I have good friends too.
oh,
So I've got Davids all around me.
I'm glad to be included today.
Um, when you, let's dive in a little bit. When you
Okay.
got the script, were you thinking, Oh shit, they're outside a lot.
Well, the funny thing about that is, even before I got the script, I interviewed, and then they were starting to do some location scouting, way, way pre-early
Right.
locations, and they wanted me to meet Peter Berg.
Hmm.
So I said, "Great, where?" And they said, "We're going to be on the Cochiti Pueblo, right on the Rio Grande River, kind of scouting along what we call the Bosque, which is where all the big trees are along the river, to look for our site for the fort. Why don't you join us out there?" And I said, "Great." And so I went out and stood in the middle of this field where we eventually built this massive set, which was our fort. And there was nothing there. It was
Yeah.
just a prairie, and we talked about it. And it was cold, and I've done westerns before, so I kind of knew what I was in for a lot. And I really wanted to do it because I wanted to work with Peter. I
Hmm.
worked on 2 seasons of Friday Night Lights way back.
Oh wow,
So
yeah.
I kind of knew him, and Carla Curry is a decorator mentor of mine, and
Mm.
she had worked on the film, and so she kind of told me about him, and she said, "Get ready, it's gonna be a hell of a ride. He's a gung ho guy." And I said, "Well, I've still got some gung ho in me. Let's go for it."
Yeah.
And so we're out there, and and he just looked at me and goes, "I think you've got the chops for this. And I was like, "Okay, good." And I
Yeah.
went home, and to be honest with you, I really had a moment where I just like looked myself in the mirror and said, "Are you up for this? This is going to be a long outdoor, up in the mountains,
Yeah.
hiking, physically demanding, pacing yourself, fabricating, struggling with the elements and rotating crew because no one can keep up this pace that long and all that kind of thing." And I said, "I think I can do it." And so me, myself, and I signed on.
I think that's really important that you're saying that because I get FOMO a lot of like, oh, I want to take this project, I want to take it, and I've sworn I'm not taking any more big ones. It's like I
Yeah.
don't want to not do this. I need
Yeah.
to experience this and to give it my all and make sure it's the best that it can be. And I know that I can do that. I think that's that inner thing too of like, I know I can make this good.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. For me, it kind of built up. I've done a lot of, mid-range projects like we all did for a long time and mixed in with TV stuff and whatnot. And then, a few big ones come along. I
Yeah.
worked, as one of the decorators on a Transformer movie. And
Warmers, I mean, that's
yeah, so
yeah.
that was a big one. And I was just like a third of it. So that kind of got me wet. And then I did Alita, which was a total up
Yeah.
world, world building experience with, vast sets, and it was an incredible experience, but that kind of geared me up, so I knew this was going to be another one. So
Yeah.
those are kind of my trilogy of big world building experiences. Of course, we always build the world because on
But this
whatever movie you're
really,
doing, but
yeah,
yeah, when you stand in a field and realize you're going
it's
to be in this field for 15 months along with everything else we did and built. We only had one little stage on one little set on stage. Everything else was shot outside on actual land where we built it all.
I mean, the builds are amazing. Like the
Yeah.
towns and the craftsmanship and the aging and what you have to build. Because I mean, I know I worked in Albuquerque a long time ago and a little bit in New Mexico, and there's some great thrift stores and everything there, but you had to
Mhm.
get quantity of things. Like you
Yeah.
had to build a lot.
Yes, we built a lot,
Yeah.
whole lot. I mean, everything: crates, furniture, benches, millwork, everything, light fixtures. We were, and the aging of everything,
Yeah.
hundreds of blankets that were aged heavily and beat up, and for all the wagons and in the store, and every jar,
I love
everything
that store.
touched. And really the building of it all came from uh, I sometimes I feel like there's a lot of luck involved with the way you put your crew together.
Mm.
And Leadman said, "Hey, I know a guy who's he works in prop building. He might be good for us." And I said, "Great, let's bring him in." So I sat and talked with him for a while. And his background, he was, an older guy, mid 40s, and he, in his early 20s, worked in Maine as apprentice to old school boat building.
Oh, wow.
And so, yeah. And so I said, "Well, can you build, if I give you raw materials, we have rust on lumber or just slabs of leftover pieces." Because my whole idea was, as they were building fort, I said, all those throw off things would be used to build the furniture we see around the fort, and the wagons and the loads, and
Right.
the stuff around teepees. And we had tons of drying racks and all that kind of stuff to do. And it just organically started happening. And he and his apprentice helper just were amazing. I brought in things, had rough drawn pictures of ladders and everything you could imagine. They did it all by grit and bait, drilling the holes, pounding pegs, tying with sinew, all that. We didn't hardly use screws or anything like that.
Right.
It was a great experience. We had time too,
And
which was
what was
great.
your prep? Well, I know, but you got shut down, right? You from the from
Yeah, well, we started, and I'm trying to think how this all happened. I started up early, and I was on for like a month, and then laid off for 2 months while they started building the fort.
Hmm.
And then we came into it, and the fort was supposed to be later in the schedule, like at the end, give us plenty of time. So we had to do the Prairie Massacre
Yeah.
and Runty's hunting camp, and we had all sorts of other, the train station, all that. Train station actually was an afterthought afterwards. But yeah, even with this, when you get into the Prairie Massacre, I was buying every wrecked trunk, every box, every chair, because these people, when you think about it, they travel and they always did have a little bit of back east with
Right.
them. They would bring
Right.
one chair or one box or one whatever. But as things went along, I read a lot of diaries. We
Wow.
had a great. He was a PhD in history from Western Wyoming University, and led the excavations of Fort Bridger when it
Oh,
became.
wow.
They went to the old site and excavated and found pottery and bottles and metal and all that kind of thing. And along with that, there was a ship that sank that was full of supplies headed in the 1850s out to Bridger. It sank in the Missouri River, and it later was excavated. He led that. So all that stuff was like Titanic. It was a small riverboat,
Oh, wow.
but it had all the pottery, all the china, all the lamps, everything. And it was all encapsulated in the mud. So it was preserved. So and it was all in a museum. So we had access to see all that and use it to create with. And he was invaluable. We started a great relationship, and I talked to him all the time. He would join us in meetings and talk to everyone.
Oh, I
But I
love
got a great friendship going with him on the side, because I realized this was a man who wrote books and volumes on this period and these people. And I've done 1880s and to early 1900s, but the 1850s, way out there where we were, was a completely different West.
that.
It wasn't the Wild West. It wasn't no trains, no goods like that. It was so primitive. And in fact, the Native Americans were much more primitive. They hadn't gotten so much of all the European bead trade, hadn't come that far. So their adornment and we made all the parfleches and all the medicine bags and all that stuff. My assistant decorator, Kelly Miller, is an expert in Native American culture. And she's born and raised here in New Mexico, and just really dove into it and got really involved, because we had Ute, Paiute, and Shoshone advisors as well that she would carry on conversations with to make sure we got all that stuff right.
So much, and it's so sacred for them.
Mm-hmm.
Everything.
Yes,
So
yes, it's all for a reason,
yeah.
And the
Every
wardrobe was next level, so I knew my stuff had to be next level. If I had a crummy looking bow or shield or a teepee, even like the teepees, a lot of them were, for deeper ones, were canvas ones, but a lot of these ones up front, I had a guy who was a Shoshone in South Idaho, who I met through our main source for the Indian native culture. She put me in touch with him, and I said, I want to build some teepees, like really have them hand stitched. We're going to be inside of them, use actual hides and buffalo hides and elk hides and all that kind of stuff that are tanned, so that we would get the light bleed and that texture. Because canvas at the 1850s was present, but not as prevalent. So they still had some of the old school teepees before the white man that still existed, mixed with canvas ones at that point. So we had him come down and talk to him, and then he went back, and I sent him hides, and he had a tannery where they cleaned them and de-furred them, all that. And there on the reservation in this big metal building that they have there, he set up, started telling everyone to come. We're going to stitch old style, make teepees. So the old people on the thing came, and he said, David, you don't know what you've done. I said, I know, I'm sure this money is really great. He goes, no, 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 no. He said, on the reservation up there, we have the old people that are cast aside, people who had, drinking and drug problems that are trying to get their lives straight. And by having this sewing circle, so to speak, it brought the old and the young and the kids all in there, and just they would tell stories about their great grandparents, all this stuff. And he goes, it just revitalized all these people, 50, 60 people that had just been abandoned, basically, just brought their whole life back in. And the whole young people that got involved, that wanted it because of the, hourly pay that he was providing, learned all the stories. And by the end of it, they were all, he said, a community was reborn.
What a gift.
Yeah, and it gets me choked up sometimes when I think about it, because we have these moments in our lives in this business where we kind of have a little touch of that occasionally, where you feel like you've really helped somebody with what we do, and it's not all disposable, and it lives on, outside in ways we don't expect going into it.
Can I ask you, I've worked on a project with Native Americans, and then they're very, and being respectful enough. When you were done with some of the elements, did they ask for it back? Or like, I know you might go in the second season, you can't do it, but like when our show ended, I was very respectful in like, these things need to go to like someone or a museum, like things like that. Like, yeah.
We had to hold on to the teepees because they were such, incredible assets. But I know where they are, and they're being held. And as soon as they're going to let me know when they want to release them, they probably will go back to that tribe. Much of the smaller pieces that we made, the power fletches and the bags and the shields and whatnot, some of them they wanted, but it was interesting because a lot of them, what it did was make them bring their stuff and make their own stuff, and add it in. And what made me feel great about it was I couldn't tell the difference at the end. Kelly had been so in depth in her experience and her just craftsmanship of making this stuff, because she's been doing it her whole life here, really came into play. So it was one of those projects where I had 3 or 4 key people that had these unique skills that were so valuable in executing the Native American world and some of this early pioneer stuff. The forts,
they're different types of fort. Like you have the Native American, you have the army, you have people making their own, little shacks and everything nightly to survive.
Yeah.
You have so many dwellings in different states of like it's snowing, it's spring. Like I was like, oh my God, the elements on this are unreal of how you had to portray all of these different little communities. It was so much.
It really was, and they had to be portrayed out in the wild.
Yeah.
So we got to make them, we got to set them up. We had this one you have up right now. This is the Mormon camp. This is the Mormon military camp, and that big pointed tent that is their kind of gathering tent, the kind of high peaked one there. We had a big dust storm come through here, and you can't see it, but the reverse on this, there's a bottleneck of a valley behind us. And the wind came from those mountains across the prairie and blasted through here and tore up many of these tents. And we had to have them rebuilt over a weekend. I'm bringing guys out there, to try and salvage. Everything had been knocked down and stirred up and torn up. And we got it back together in time.
Let me ask you this. Did you block shoot sets? Like, did you shoot this set out?
Some of them we did, yeah. Some of them we did block shoot. Some of them we'd go away and come back. We went away and came back to the Shoshone village because there was a lot. We shot it, and then we came back for the big, battle scenes within that the
Right.
raid on that village, and we had to give time for special effects to bury all their gas lines and rig all that kind of stuff. So we would be there to move things and help them, and then put it all back together. This one we shot out, uh, and the cavalry we shot. Well, the cavalry we shot twice. We did come back to that. All the different campsites. The fort, was the Prairie Massacre stayed there for a while. It stayed out in the elements. But some of this I had to move from place to place. I mean, a lot of the elements in all the military camps and the fort and this crates and trunks and things like that moved from place to place.
Mm.
We reused and recycled a lot of dressing. And
Wow.
we just had to with the budget. It was a sizable budget, no doubt, but it was even a bigger movie.
Never know. It's
Yeah.
never.
So
Um,
we loaded up, moved a lot of stuff around.
the I had to cut you off before, but you were on, and then while they built, you
Oh
had to
yeah,
cut off, and
yeah.
then
I took off, and then I came back, and then it was a big long stretch, and then we shut down because we lost the weather. It got to a point, the strikes were starting to happen. We did get shut down one day when we were shooting where that train scene was. There were some other scenes on that ranch. That's where the cavalry camp was, on that ranch as well, which was a private movie ranch called Bonanza Creek, which gets used for a lot of different things. But that one, once they found that they were shooting there, they came and picketed us and shut us down. They wouldn't picket in front of the pueblos on the native ground. It was just kind of bad form, I guess. I don't know why they didn't, but at one point they had me move that whole cavalry camp onto a pueblo. But by the time we got there, all the trees were leaving out green, and we had to shoot a bunch of stuff because Taylor broke his ankle doing
oh
some stuff.
wow,
Yeah, so we had to set him aside for 6 weeks while he healed and shoot everything else, which jumbled up the order of shooting. That's why we had to go and come from some stuff. And once he got healed, then the tree started leaving out, and the DP just got to a point where it's like, I can't get it to match.
right,
We're coming back to stuff. So they
right.
said, fine, we'll go down and we'll come back to it when the weather changes back, which we did later. Came
So,
back later, snowing again.
so you were on this for over a year then.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Timeline wise, it was about 16 months,
Mm,
but I had 2 of those months off
right.
in there. So yeah, a lot of prep, a lot of, they had me on early for prep, and I think it was about 9 weeks, 8, 9 weeks of prep, doing all the research and sourcing materials, gathering things. Had to gather up so much stuff. These, when you look in
So
here, you see
much.
teepees, but you see these domed wigwams we built also. There was another kind of native thing. And then we had all sorts of trapper shacks and this and that we were doing along the way.
Did you,
And
I was gonna say with the interior, let me get to this one. I love the shop. The shop is fantastic.
yeah, the mercantile,
Yeah.
yeah, it was great. We had a lot of fun with this one. And this was another one where all the counters and the shelves and all that we built, all of it.
Oh,
It was all from scratch because we wanted the lumber to match the outside structures, So we used all the cast off materials and milled some of them, and had used draw knives to, get them all right so they didn't look, straight from Home Depot. We didn't get any of this lumber from anywhere except a sawmill carving it all. And then it was, trying to get the right lighting and all the food goods and the bags. And this room converted. These counters that we actually built them, they're hidden, they're on casters, because at the end they have the big party when they're burning and everyone's drinking
right.
and celebrating, And so things would move. So it would turn during the day, it was a mercantile, and at night we would push things back, and it became more of a gathering bar,
Yeah.
clear material off and set up the liquor bottles and all that kind of stuff. So it
This
was a dual thing.
is this the same? This is a different cabin.
This is a different. This is the dentist slash doctor's room we had on the inside the fort. There were several structures, and one of them, this was an interior we did, and I had this custom made, built from scratch. My guys built that operating table from
Oh,
an
it's
old
scary.
Lycurgus Ives kind of line drawing I saw of something similar to that. So
Oh,
we built it, and I found these great cuffs to hang and the lighting, and a lot of bloody rags. There are buckets of feet and all that. We had Howard Berger was our special effects makeup guy, and he's with K&B, who do some of the great
oh,
special effects these days. He is the B, and he's Berger of K&B.
wow.
And I'd worked with him before on some other projects, and so he was invaluable in giving me the gore I needed to set the stage. All sorts of fleshy things, and buckets of frostbitten feet and
Right,
toes,
right,
and
right.
it's just like
It's
it
so
was.
barbaric and it's
I know.
so unreal.
I ruined so many clothes just with stage blood. There's so much of it. It would wash out, but I'd wear it again and get another layer. And I just had these
Yeah.
pants that looked like they were pink splotted, because I'd wash them out and wear them again.
Yeah, we all have work clothes. It's like I don't care if gets dirty. It's been dirty a million times. Oh
That's
wait.
right.
The lighting that you collaborated with and the
Mhm.
wait, I have the DP is Jacques. Is this
Jacques. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Jacques. He was great.
It's so emotional, especially this scene when
Mhm.
the captain's writing a letter and
Yeah.
then the scene that follows is pretty awful. But
Yeah.
it's when you are selecting like these gas lamps and everything, you're telling him like, look, I'm putting one, there's not a million lamps in here. Like,
Right.
it's limited. Like we have the realism is it's not a lamp store.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you have to be very choosy with what you're putting on the table there and very,
Yeah. We collaborate a lot. And that happened up, or, having that long prep gave me time to give him things and test out different wick systems, and,
Mhm.
getting wick candles and all that with the natural beeswax from,
Yeah.
House of Candles. And I've used
Yeah.
them for years. Call them up and they come through every time with great
Yep.
stuff,
Yep.
rock solid. And we did a few, these actually were oil in here. When we were on these close interiors, we used the oil, but we did have some converted with LED fakes for deep background in the fort, for in windows, and deep background that they would wire up and control those. But all these interiors, yeah, it got to a point where really, after I showed them some stuff and we set up a few things and I started showing them research and all that, they kind of just let me go in a lot of
Yeah.
ways.
That's good.
There's such volume to it. Of course, I would have options. We're here. There was probably, 4 or 5 different lamps for him to test, and I would dress it how I wanted, what I thought would work. And, generally we would do a test fire of everything, and I would look and do some photos, send them off to him to get a feel for it. And then props had a few things that they would add, bring in, as needed. I fed them a lot of stuff to have on their truck to, you know,
Yeah. Basically.
add to it. But yeah, it was, and depending where we were, it was the style of lamp. Of
Yeah.
course, the cavalry guys had really nice stuff.
And you have
And
beautiful, beautiful oil lamps too. Like sourcing those and
yeah,
aren't, old and because I mean they're old here, but they're not old as they should be now. They're only
right,
20
yeah,
years old there.
yeah, a lot of that's one thing that I, have been doing westerns and period things. We all struggle with that, right?
Yeah.
There should be some new things because this lamp was maybe 5 years old, not
Yeah.
70 years old, right? So we did like the one you see here on his desk. I'll give credit for that particular lamp to another decorator I brought in, named Elaine O'Donnell, very experienced out of New York. She lives here now, but very experienced decorator. And I started talking to her about the lamps because I said, I really want you to help me with Bridger's office. It's going to really take both of us to get it to where I think it go, because I was managing so many other sets at the same
Yeah.
time. I wanted a decorator on site at the fort to be my liaison when I physically couldn't be there. I didn't want 10 people coming to me with questions. I wanted
Right.
them going to her. She could answer filter out ones, and then bring me the ones that really we needed to discuss together about, the hero implements on his desk. And she found that light from a woman who had a really nice store in Santa Fe,
Mm.
and she closed it down and during the pandemic, and it was a personal lamp of hers, and it took a while to get it from her, but she finally did sell it to us. I said, if it's going to be in the fort, I want to own it all as much as possible,
Yeah.
especially on the show, because it was rough on things. There
Yeah.
was a lot of things just because of the nature of where we were and that kind of thing. So, but that one did make me nervous because that was the only one we had. And it's such a showpiece of the set. And every day I'm like my own set dresser, I'm like, this one, you take it to bed with you. I don't care what happens. Nothing can happen to this lamp. It's established.
The other thing that kills me is, as gorgeous as that lamp is, there's only one candle lit in this scene.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we did have some light blowing in. It was a
Yeah,
daytime.
no, it's daytime. I
Yeah.
mean, I get it, but I'm like, man, man,
Neither one.
you got
This
one.
one, there were times that, Jacques wanted his shafts of light glowing in.
Yeah. No,
He
yeah.
felt like, when Brigham Young was present, he
Yeah,
wanted to
there
have
he is.
he
The
wanted to have the Jesus rays, we called them, the light
oh
coming through
yeah,
the smoke,
atmosphere.
when yeah, Brigham Young was president, it was like, you were in this godly man, at least
Yeah.
in his mind.
This other shot I have on here, the lamp is lit. This is
Mhm.
another, the next episode
Yeah.
seems downward, but the the depth and the research and everything that went into this set, I just think it's like it should be a class in its own of
Yeah.
what a
It
hoarder
was
looks like in 18.
exactly the whole thing. When it was described to me at first, it was his storeroom.
Mm,
And then we started developing it more into, well, he is a hoarder. The only way he keeps things safe from being stolen,
yeah, right.
he has them right with him. He keeps all his most precious things, stacks of hot furs and the candles and the nice lights. His desk is in a desk I rented from a guy out of Austin, Texas, who has a place called the Relic Source, which is a great Western and period prop rental house that I've used. And we trucked in a lot of stuff. And that desk was one thing that I immediately thought of, because to me it looked like a desk that he found that someone had tossed out of their wagon
Right.
on the trek. Because reading the diaries along the trail to the Oregon Trail, there were just all sorts of things tossed out along the way because they realized the animals were getting tired. They had to lighten their loads.
Right.
So that we actually had a broken leg, which you can't see behind the hides there on the corner in the front. We kind of just took it off. And I called him up. I said, can we torch it like it was salvaged out of a fire? And he said, that'd be cool. Do it. I'll keep it. I'll use it at it has a big event center. He goes, I'll put it in there just as a talking piece. I want it back no matter what you do to it. So we did. We took a lead off of it, took blow torches to it, just made it, look like something he would
Yeah.
do,
I mean, it looked like it's had a life of its own.
Yeah,
Given.
exactly. I was in some guy's parlor back in Pennsylvania. And the man of the house died, and the woman loaded up going west with some new guy, or you make all these backstories. You know how it goes. You just build these stories in your head of where things came from.
Did you did you get really sad? I don't think I have it, but the fire at the in the of the fort and everything.
Yeah.
How was that coordinating with like special effects? I mean, you're burning down a lot of dressing. At least it looks like it. I mean, I know
Yeah, it looked
doubles
like it.
and everything, but it's a lot to coordinate with when
It
there's fire.
was. And Matt Kushner, who was our special effects coordinator, was fantastic to work with. And his son is his right hand man, who's on the out there with us all the time. And we came to the fort and shot there for quite a while, and then we left for a couple of weeks while we prepared it for the burn. They buried gas lines all throughout the place. Of course, I de-dressed a ton of stuff. We talked to Jacques about really where he wanted his camera angles, so I could eliminate everything else, because it's a fire is very dangerous out on the pueblos. And where we were shooting, there were huge sections of where they get wildfires here in New Mexico all the time, that burn through large portions of the forest. And so they were very nervous about all the fire. So we had to have total control of it and eliminate, things that were fuel, basically.
Mhm.
So by working with the DP, special effects guys, and the technicians and my guys, it all just kind of it felt safe. It looked. I remember when I saw it. I wasn't there when they burned it. I was off working with something else at the time, and I came back and I was like, "Whoa!" They dropped where the things fall. That was all pre-rigged, predetermined what we would hit. What the what what it all was very thought out. And this team that works with Peter Berg, I was kind of the new kid on the block. His special effects guys, his stunt guys, his camera people, most of this was all done handheld, 3 cameras all the time, moving around. Um, and they are a machine, well-oiled, movie making machine in the old school way of doing it. He didn't want to do big set extensions. He wanted me to make this thing, as big as I possibly could, and the same with the fort, let's build it big, 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 big. And that's just the way he did it. We did, there obviously were some set extensions of mountains and things and valleys, but we were really up in those valleys. We had snowcats and all that stuff hauling our dressing up to the mountain pass shack, all that kind of
The
stuff.
French encampment. That was
Yeah,
I
yeah.
don't have any pictures of that. I couldn't
Oh yeah,
find any
that one.
pictures of that one,
That
but
was
man,
another fun one. That was
that
not
is
far from the fort.
fun.
Yeah, that one. Once again, the woman Kelly Miller, my assistant decorator, I put her in charge of that. I mean, the Campbell Camp was a fun one of mine to collect things for.
Right.
But once we kind of laid it out and got our kind of basic, the hinge point was they dug a hole in the ground for kind of a subterranean hovel. And we had some dugouts built back into the mountain that were kind of in the hillside that were kind of hovels that we did entrances. But all the wagons and the turnovers and all the weird furniture, Kelly's fingerprints were all over that set. And that set was right on the river. And we had the snow melt happening when winter was going away. And that was one set we had to wait for Taylor's ankle to heal before we could go to it and shoot it, because he had a lot of action in there, moving around. And so the river went up and it half flooded it, which at first everyone was like, "Oh, this is travesty." But then when the water receded, it just added a natural layer of gunk. Things were hanging in branches that we had drug in, things, moss, and the flow of the currents made the ground very undulating and almost alive and like snake-like. Our hovels kind of half flooded and just made it all even creepier.
Oh yeah, it's awful scenes with the French.
Yes, hard to watch.
But it is
Yes.
like, wow, it's very it reminded me a lot of Deliverance of
Yeah.
you're
Yeah.
happening upon a family here who's set up just to like screw you. Like you're gonna
Yeah, exactly.
but they are living there. Like they've set up camp here. Like
Yeah, this is their trap.
that's
Their
crazy.
trap.
That's
Yeah,
crazy.
they've decided that at first we dug all the stuff into the ground, like they got stuck in the mud, and their guides took off and just abandoned them.
Right.
And so these French people had to resort to cannibalism to survive, and decided they kind of went crazy and just kind of liked it.
Yeah.
And so they used the little girl to lure
Yellow
people
jackets.
Yeah, Yellow Jackets, exactly. Yellow Jackets.
If I could speak
1800s.
French, I'd say it in French, and it would be really funny, but I don't. So
Yeah,
Yellow
right.
Jackets.
Exactly. So it was that was a fun set in a lot of ways, and that was actually built in an area where there had been a forest fire come through there and burn all the trees.
Oh wow!
And we had to go. The winds came, and when the winds come, big branches would break off and fall. So they had to hire a tree service to come in and top all the trees and remove all the dangerous branches, because some of the branches are 14-inch diameter and come crashing down. And so they had to make it safe before we could really go in there and work a lot.
Which is there someone, was the snow natural in some sets, or was it more?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
it was a combination. That again was our special effects crew. They had custom rigs on mules built to spray. They would go 200 feet in either direction from the base of their snow machine
Wow.
and spray it. We had semi truck loads of fake snow. It was a huge line item once we started to lose the snow.
Right.
Once we came into the lower elevations and still needed it. So yeah, they sprayed a lot. We had a lot of fake snow, but then, in New Mexico fashion, we would get snow in random times and it seemed to always happen at opportune times, like this one where you're at in these camps, some of these camps we would set up to do, we had scouted it and it was snowy like this. And then the sun comes out in New Mexico, it dries and evaporates because it's so dry here. And they'd have to come in and spray and vice versa. Sometimes in the morning, we would have snow all over everything when we showed up, which was just kind of a nice surprise. It's just wild weather for sure, especially
I
when you're up in the foothills and
Oh
up at
yeah.
the higher elevations. You never know what's going to happen.
When I shot in Albuquerque, first of all, I thought it would be warm the whole time. I was there in February. It was freezing. I had to go buy a winter jacket because I didn't.
Yeah. And the wind.
Yeah, it was freezing,
Mm-hmm.
absolutely freezing. And then we had scouted up on the mountain, and it was they were making a little camp, a little campfire. When we went back to shoot it weeks later, it was covered in snow, which was not in the script at all. And it was such a low budget thing. My designer and I were with our hands trying to get snow out of our little campfire and like kicking it, kicking dirt over it. We were,
Yeah.
oh my God,
Mm-hmm.
we didn't anticipate this at all, and they're
Mm-hmm.
coming. Like, what are we
Mm-hmm.
gonna do? Like,
Yeah.
so yeah, it's
Yeah.
very unpredictable on the
Very.
desert mountain. Well, I don't know what's going on over there, but it was
Uh-huh. People
awesome.
I know that have mountain houses, they wait until about now. Usually Mother's Day is when you can go back up and de-winterize
Oh,
things, because but we've had 80-degree days in early April,
hmm.
but then it's back down to 27, so
Oh, those mountains back. I mean, I don't know if that's real now, but that's like those mountains.
yeah, those are,
Like,
yeah. Those
did you have a really big challenge? Like, what do you think was the most challenging thing about decorating this? I mean, for you, I could think of like 30 things that I can look. I'm out.
yeah, the biggest challenge is, it's an old saying that, you eat the elephant one bite at a time. You know, if you try and see the whole village, you just like could throw your hands up and go, we can't do it. But, I try and lead from the front. I don't just show up and go get my car and leave. I'm out there with them,
Yeah.
you know, helping pitch TPs. I know how to do it. I've done it before. And it's kind of my lead man background. It's like I've had two
Right.
careers. I've been in this so long. I did 20 years as a lead man. I'm going to do 20 years as a decorator. So I logistically have that advantage, I think, sometimes to know what is possible. And really, the crew I have here in New Mexico are very loyal and very hardworking, because they see I'm the same, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
But as far as the scale, the fort was the biggest in scale, and then Shoshone Village, the one we're looking at now, was the next, and they of course were the Native American versus the white man environments. The cavalry camps and the Mormon camps and some of these other things, you know, definitely were big sets, but they were just medium sets comparison to some of the big ones we did.
They're big mediums. Big mediums. Because I know that your designer
Renee,
Renee, I know it's a lot to design, and I know it's a lot to plan out and a lot of logistics and everything. Um, Something like this, I always feel like, well, what did they do? I mean, like it's all decor. Like, what did they
you know
do?
what? You know
They
what?
getting coffee? What were
You know
they
what
doing?
Renee
But
was
a
really. I mean,
lot.
Renee was talented in a lot of things, but what she was really talented in was kind of the design. Um, Within the computer world. We had great reference, great computer designs to work off of, and great layout.
Well, that's it.
So
It's
I had a
correct.
basic skeleton
Yeah,
of
the
the
guidance.
plot that I'm
Yeah.
working with.
Yeah.
what I put on it. But a lot of times, if you don't have someone who's willing to say, I want 6 teepees here, here, here,
Right.
and here,
Right.
okay, then you don't waste time moving things
Yeah.
to camera.
I don't move shit.
You know, things are figured out.
Yeah.
That she was real good at that, and staying in touch with Peter and Jacques about, and on the scouts, it's not just about where we're putting the honey wagon. We would demand our time because we knew we wouldn't have time later to make changes. These decisions had to be locked, and for the most part, they were.
It's really
Then
hard.
it,
It's really hard when, as you said in the beginning, like, well, we scouted a field
yeah,
and it's going to be this and at least in my thoughts, not everyone can visualize this field, and the designer really needs to rope everybody in and say, this is what we're having and this is what it's going to be. You got to tell me now if I do need 6 TPs over here, or if we do have to, hide the cables and the honeywell. You know what I mean? Like, there's
yeah,
so much going on when it's a field. There's so much
yeah.
to
And when
coordinate
we're handheld
design.
and they're just guys on their feet moving around, popping off footage, you never knew what direction. So almost all these sets had to be 360. I mean,
Right.
there always was that slice where you had the stake beds and prop
Right.
truck, camera truck, and all that to deal with. But luckily, most of our land was kind of undulating, so there were little hills to hide things behind, or stands of trees to, add more. Greens department, they did an incredible job,
Yeah. I didn't even get
making
into the
all
game.
feel lived in. They did.
Yeah.
We had this crazy idea with anchoring the teepees by piling wood around. We were trying to make some of the differentiations of the different villages.
Hmm.
So that we had the Ute, the Paiute, and the Shoshone, plus the encampment outside Fort Bridger, which all had elements of Native Americans.
Right.
So how do we make it so you feel like you're in a different place?
Right.
That's where the Greens guys really helped me out a couple of times when I was scratching my head going, this is starting to look too much the same. What can we do? Well, let's just make big piles of wood. Let's do it.
Huh. Yeah.
We'd gather firewood. These people aren't traveling the way they used to. And so they're kind of encamped and stay.
Did you have
So it's,
a favorite set? I hope I have a.
oh boy. I mean, yeah, Bridges' office is for an interior was way up there.
Wow.
Um,
That's a great set.
and I think the Shoshone, we had the Shoshone when I finally got it full dressed, and we had shot there a couple days. And so it started to feel lived in. And we had a night scene where it's a big celebration going on, and they're kind of preparing for war. And it's kind of night. We had the drum circle, and they brought in these drummers, true Shoshone drummers. A couple of them were, well known. These were like the pinnacle of Shoshone
Mm.
medicine came. They were old. We had to help them out, down to where they were. And
Huh.
it was like everyone had gone to eat. And I stayed on set. And these guys were all out there because they were really old. And they just stayed. And they just decided to start drumming and practicing and getting their voices going and just doing their thing, getting in the
Oh, that would be
zone. And
beautiful.
the sun was going. We were waiting to shoot at night, but they started pumping the smoke. And I was just kind of standing there. And then slowly the extras started showing up. And it was like I was the only Caucasian in this village. I felt like I was a fly on the wall, and it just came alive, and it just kind of overwhelmed me.
Oh,
It was just like, whew,
that's a
I,
beautiful.
I was transported. It was powerful magic that night. And that was probably the pinnacle of it. Doing the fort when it was just full of people and a beehive, that was great. But I've done lots of big city streets, and it kind of had that vibe. But
Right.
that one where no crew were around really at all, except
Oh,
some smoke technicians and the extras in their full, buckskins, and hearing that, in the distance. And there was this valley we were in, and the mountain was there, and I was just like, what is happening? This is
rolling,
just,
rolling,
yeah, all the pain left my body at that point.
rolling. Somebody get
Yeah, exactly.
be great if you like whipped out your camera. Hold on, guys.
Yeah,
Get this
right.
angle before you start.
Uh,
Before
I
you start.
really, I'm so glad we have good images shot by professionals, because I'm the worst about that.
Oh,
I
me too.
People are always like, why aren't you shooting your sets? I'm like, well, I don't know. I get so into it, I just forget to do it.
Well, I usually say if like anybody has any photos and they want to give them to me, it's great. And there's a lot online. Of course, the French I couldn't get, and I can't like screenshot Netflix. And when I try to do it on my TV,
Mm.
there's always reflections, and it just never looks good. And I don't want to ever put up a shot and be like, "Hey, look! Oh, don't mind me in the reflection of your of your
Oh,
set."
you've got some great ones. A few of these I haven't seen before, you know, and
No,
they're great to see when it's like this and you've got, people in them and the light. And
I gotta say though, I mean, it's a film. I mean, you did like six films here. This is such,
yeah, we shot it as one big movie. There
yeah.
was no episode. We didn't break episode. We
Oh,
didn't.
nice.
It was just shot as one giant movie. So, um, yeah, it was.
It's huge undertaking. I mean, when I was watching it, I actually watched it on an airplane, and
Yeah,
kids were next to me, and I had to keep moving my screen a little because I was like, "Uh-oh, don't look
yeah,
at that."
mhm, yeah.
But
Another tomahawk kill. Let's don't see
yeah,
that.
I was so, but like my kids had their own screen, so I was so into it. And then the finale, the last episode I watched at home, but I was
Mhm.
like, so into it. It was such an enjoyable, like one watch. Do you know what
Yeah.
I mean? I was uninterrupted. I had
Hmm.
like 5 hours of the show and then did the later, but it was I like whew, this is a lot. Like like it's so many it's so much going on in the story
Hmm.
as a decorator looking at it like, oh man, that now they're in the snow, now they're in the
Hmm.
wolf cabin, now they're just like, oh my God.
Yeah. Yeah. It was like that. It was,
Yeah.
and I don't know, it's,
Beautiful, beautiful, tremendous work. It's
thank you. Thank you. It's like another one of my, you know, mentors of mine was this woman I worked with way back on RoboCop 2, which
ooh,
really I consider the movie that made me run away with the circus because it was the first I'd been at the time I was interviewing for jobs at the bank and brokerage firms and all this, my big fancy education. And I'd worked with this decorator before, and she got a job as a lead man and wanted me to come be, kind of a gang boss dresser for her. And it was my first thing. And they were paying me like 3, 4 times what I was going to get working at the bank. And I was having a
right.
blast. It's in my early 20s and just like, I'm going to do this for a while.
Yeah.
And she was great. This is all before cell phones and all that stuff. Um, she had worked and been trained as a librarian. And so we were working in Houston, Texas, and they have a fabulous downtown library. And she had worked there, and she took me in and taught me the value of doing your research, doing your homework. You
Oh,
know, I mean, to do kind of these layered things that feel real for me at least. I've got to, thank God Dudley gave me these diaries, and I read these people's accounts of starting off and then they're halfway through it and then failing and, you know, then the military guys coming and then all the Mormons coming. That was a whole story I didn't know
I never
much
knew
about
it.
Mormon. I
Fascinating.
didn't, yeah, it was. And just the nature of the land and why Bridger built his fort where he did. And, all that kind of stuff. And it led me to a guy. They told me there was a guy who was a great gun collector, antique gun collector, who lived in this town of Pecos outside of Santa Fe, kind of in the hills. And I went to visit him, and it turned out he was a Vietnam vet, and he lived on this property and had been collecting his whole life. And he actually had a weapon, a rifle that was Jim Bridger's weapon. And I said, "You own this?" And he was like, "Yeah, let me show it to you." He got it out and said, "This is Jim's gun." And
Oh my
I was like,
God.
"Oh my God, I'm holding a gun that's worth a couple $100,000 probably." And of course, his house is this beautiful, Pueblo style home full of artifacts. And we talked for a long while and sat and drank coffee. And then he just kind of decided, I could see it turned. He kind of trusted me and decided, okay. And he started telling me about that he lived as a mountain man and came down to gatherings at Fort Bridger and all this. When he came back from Vietnam to get over it,
Oh
he got his horse, made buckskins and all, and just rode the Continental Divide for a year and a half in the mountains, living off the land with the pueblos, going down to the forts, all this kind of stuff. And just was this wealth of knowledge about Bridger and that world, and showing me this is the right type of lamp, this is the right type of candle holder, this is this, and just it was just like I was so many times on this project in the right place at the right time, and just said the right thing to somebody.
Yeah.
And it happens in our career. Sometimes it's like, okay, I'm doing a New York apartment, blah blah blah, or whatever. But when you're doing this historical stuff,
Yeah, it's so important.
you
It's
know,
get it
and
right.
the only way to get it there, this is before cameras.
Right.
Either you find great illustrations and paintings, or everything else is 1880s and newer.
Oh.
So you're seeing Native Americans that have been westernized to a degree.
Yeah,
So until we read about it.
I know you're on the same page as I am. I would never have researched so many things in my life if not for this job.
Yeah.
And I'm so thankful for it of just having, even if I retain a tenth of what I've researched, I'm
Mm-hmm.
so much more knowledgeable for having this job because what other, like you were saying, you were going to accounting and like we're in a bank, like
Yeah,
you would
right.
have never been looking this up. Like you wouldn't have held that gun. Like it's crazy. Our job's crazy.
It is crazy. It can drive you crazy, but
Oh yeah.
I get other people who just, my dad said it to me. My dad was a physician, he was a surgeon, and he said to me at some point, he would get me jobs from patients that were always like really hard physical jobs, working for some construction guy or a bricklayer or whatever, in the summers when I was growing up. And he came from a time where a lot of his friends all went into he was from Chicago. They were all working in meat packing plants or car plants up in Michigan and all that. And he goes, David, you want to go through your life and lead a life where you live for the weekends and you say, I spent 30 years, I punched a lot of holes at my station at the factory, but I had a lot of beers at the corner at the bar. If that's what you want to do, then do it. But I'm giving you a taste of it. Because I said, why do you give me all these dang jobs that are so hard? And he goes, I want you to do something. If it's going to be hard, be passionate about it,
Right. Right.
And then I got in the film business. I learned what hard work was. The art department, I swear,
Yeah.
decorators, I take my hats off to every single one of us, no matter what the project is.
Yeah.
It's the hardest job on the crew.
It is. It really is. It's because
You know,
it's more than just opening the set, just doing the research and then opening the set. I mean, you're involved in every single aspect of it. You have such a crew to run. And as you were saying before, like bringing people on to help you because there's just so much.
yeah,
And I think the more are like a project like this where it's a film, but you're on TV but the expectation is a film, you
oh
know,
yeah,
our abilities are only as good as our crews. And having like the ability to ask for help or to be, budgeted that I'm going to need help with this. This is too big for us. Like it's
yeah, yeah. And
so
for me, it's always with the crew down to office PAs. I sit and talk with them all my dressers, everything, and coming up, through all those ranks. Um, it made me realize, and it was another thing my dad taught me, is like, everyone has a story. You don't know anyone's background. If I wouldn't have sat and talked to that prop maker and found out he was a boat builder that knew how to build
right,
wooden
right.
things with pegs and hammers and old school drills and all that, and it just like, because I was frustrated with the furniture I was finding. I was like, all the stuff at the prop houses is great for some things, but it's got zillions drywall screws in it.
Right.
It's not, it just doesn't feel right for this, what I wanted to achieve. And I knew the materials were there, but I needed to have that connection with somebody that I could trust to sit and talk to and let them know, go for it. I don't make all the right choices. You're not going to make all the right choices, but together we're going to do something special, and once you empower your crew that way
Yes.
and
Yes.
let them feel
Yes.
like they won't get laughed at or berated or that's a dumb idea, what are you thinking? No, every idea has merit. You just got to look for it, and just the courage to bring it up. If that one doesn't work, don't you stop telling me something.
Right.
No,
Going.
if you were a hunter, something about tanning leather, let's talk about it.
Yeah. It
I
all
came in, I had said, let's get sinew. We went to, all the supply houses and ordered a bunch of sinew on rolls and all this, dyed hemp rope and all. And I came in, and one of my guys was just, he was a Native American on my crew. He was braiding. He had taken a hide and just taken this knife that we got and just was ripping strips, all different layers and crooked and just braiding it into all these things we used so many times. I mean, it came into play when she's tied, when Sarah's tied to the tree in the Wolf Clan camp.
Right.
They had like a leather rope that they were going to use, right? And I had all these other things woven, and we aged them, and we would like sit around and you know grab them and stretch them and rough them up and throw them in concrete dumps mixers and all this kind of stuff. I said, well, this looks really hard, but it's really soft. It's going to be around her neck. And it's got all this great texture. I said, why don't we get rid of that rope and let's use this? And they were just like, yeah, get rid of that rope, But if I wouldn't have had that Native American on my crew and given them the permission to just do whatever,
The
you know,
creativity is there. Like people,
yeah,
most people who are in this industry in whatever level are creative, and
yeah,
letting people like it's not just us who gets to be like you're saying, like the crew and the other researchers or the PAs, like bringing you research anything. It all
yeah.
lends to it. Like it all lends to what we put on the screen and how it comes out. It's so many spokes in the wheel, as I say.
There are so
So
many
many
spokes in that wagon.
so many things. I can't thank you enough for giving me this time, especially on this Saturday afternoon. Thank you so much
Oh, I love it. I
for doing
love
it.
it.